frightening situation. People actually living, as you say, in a war zone.
Yes.
And the federal government, under Bush as well as the incumbent, apparently could care less. They think illegal immigration is just fine, and they're not willing to deal with it. And it's staggering, because those folks are the ones that are first paying the price of illegal immigration. And if they try to sell their place to move to a safer place, who in the world would want to buy one of those ranches?
In a war zone, that's right. Let's just stop for a second here. I in my book, Mystery Babylon, New World Order Unveiled, I tell the story of how 25 years ago I got the information and documented the importation of cocaine here with the help of the CIA, the Mossad, and the Special Forces under George Bush as CIA director. That was called Operation Watchtower, ran in conjunction with Iran-Contra, but it was a little bit more top secret, because it said that the CIA and the Mossad were bringing all the drugs into a little protected airport called Mena, Arkansas. I've made the statement I was fairly comfortable with being called a right-wing extremist under Clinton after what happened to Waco. But when the real right-wing extremist got in power in the form of George Bush, I may have become a liberal. I'm not sure what I am anymore. But the thing that brought that to mind is what you made, the statement you made about Dr. Slidell, talking about the federal government being the enemy right now. They have pointed us, and FEMA, they have pointed at us, in case of a single outbreak of smallpox in a major metropolitan area, Colonel John Brigaroff said in the briefing, the first FEMA briefing after they were rolled into Homeland Security, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't line up on that Kmart parking lot and get a vaccine that might kill them.
And you know what? They don't have that many troops available for that.
No, they don't.
We're so extended throughout the world that that's just not even, I don't think, theoretically possible. And you know, I know enough military guys. I don't think they would be able to count on all of the military doing something like that on U.S. soil for the American people. They understand posse comitatus, and they're not. There are some of them that are just going to flat out say, "Are you crazy, Sarge?"
I would believe we had a way to handle that in Vietnam. It was called fragging.
Well, that could happen if they are silly enough to really push this thing. Yeah,
Okay, now, but with that in mind, with that scenario in mind, what about the BATF, the ones that didn't show up, you know, at the Oklahoma City Federal Building on September 11th? They're supplying the drug dealers, the drug cartels. I think that means the CIA, but maybe I could be wrong. I don't know what goes on inside it. But they're supplying them with guns. And the Attorney General, he's been called on the carpet about this. What is going on with this? How is our... This is, to me, this really illustrates perfectly why the federal government is our enemy. I mean, if they're importing the drugs in here and then arresting your children, your neighbors, your family because of something they got in their pocket, I call that a police state.
Sure enough. There's the idea that seems to be operative for these people is that we're not their masters, that we're their subjects, and we're supposed to do whatever they tell us to do, and they don't pay a never mind to the Constitution, which limits rather severely what we have allowed them to do. They don't think in terms of our allowing them, that they're our employee. That is just not something they even want to talk about, and I think we need to talk about it a lot so that it is something that they're going to have to deal with, and they won't be able to act in such an unrestrained way if everybody, or a substantial number of Americans, understand that, hey, you're, you're acting outside your authority. Go back to another sheriff. And Elkhart County, Indiana, dairy farmer produces raw milk. And I don't know what it is about raw milk. I've consumed it for years, but the FDA hates it. And they put it out of business.
Bullshit. Recorded live.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Larry. You're talking about Larry Pratt's my guest today. I just started recording on another channel here. Larry Pratt's my guest today, and Larry just mentioned the whole controversy that's going on with the FDA not approving milk. Is that because milk's good for us?
Well, it's certainly better for us than pasteurized milk.
Now, Larry, what I've been telling people for years is that any time a communist regime tries to take over a country, they go after three classes of people in order. The first is the farmers and ranchers, the people that are supplying the food because they don't want you to supply your own food. Two, they go after the intelligentsia, that's anybody that's smart enough to know what the hell they're doing. And third, they go after the veterans and the law enforcement that are still loyal to the old regime. In that case, any of us that still honor our oath to the Constitution. Isn't that what is happening right now? I mean, this whole thing with the ranchers, with the farmers down on the border, they're trying to go in. They're trying and you know, they're going after the law enforcement now. This is what's happened with the veterans. And with the whole ADL type thing, they're trying to demonize the veterans, and somehow they're coming home to be terrorists. Because why? Because the elite are scared to death that we might actually arrest some of them and try them for treason. I mean, isn't it still a hanging offense? Isn't treason still a hanging offense?
I'll tell you what, they ran into this little problem. Well, they run into it in a number of counties. One of my examples of this that I enjoy repeating involves a member of Gun Owners of America, Sheriff Pratt Rogers of Elkhart County, Indiana. Wonderful guy, homeschools his kids, and just a guy that really understands the Constitution, took it seriously when he took an oath to uphold it. And so when the FDA came into his county and told a farmer that if he didn't stop producing that raw milk, they were going to seize his equipment, and the farmer, of course, can't live without selling that milk, so he, of course, continued and complained to the sheriff about what was happening. Sheriff Rogers went out to Mr. Hochstedter's farm and looked over the place and enjoyed some raw milk, and emailed the EPA lawyer, the FDA lawyer, sorry, and in Washington, and said, well, I just want to put you on notice that if your people put so much as 1 foot on his property, I will arrest you. And back came an answer from that attorney to Sheriff Rogers saying, if you try that, we'll arrest you. And his response was, game on. And in November was when this was coming to a head, and his raw milk, that farmer's raw milk, is still being sold. So the feds realized that they are not prepared to deal with a determined resistance, which is capable of resisting them, and obviously would have the support of the people of the county. Sheriff Rogers is an elected official, unlike these unelected bureaucrats that are trying to run our lives without our consent, without our permission, against the Constitution. And it's so refreshing to know about sheriffs that are doing these things. And you mentioned that conference in Las Vegas that Sheriff Mack put together. There are hopefully going to be others. I know that there's another one being set for September, and it's going to be in Delaware, right at ground zero, where that sheriff is being threatened by the libs in the state who want to defang his law enforcement authority, because he's an independent-minded guy, and he's expressed an interest in not going along with the socialist flow, and they want to say, well, you don't have any way to resist it, you don't have any law enforcement authority. Hopefully he's going to succeed telling them, "Oh yeah, well, game on," and that's what it's going to take, I think. We've come to the point where the socialist way of thinking has caught on with enough people, strongly enough, that they just assume that whatever the government says, well, that's what we have to do. And it comes as quite a shock to them. I really think it comes as a shock to them because they've been schooled this way to think that whatever the government says. I remember, this was years ago, I was giving a talk at American University, and I made the statement that the Constitution is not a living, breathing document. It means exactly what the founders intended it to mean when they wrote it, and we have to make sure that we understand what those words meant to them, because that's what's binding on our government officials now. And this kid said, "I've never heard that. Everything I've been taught is that the Constitution is a living, breathing, growing document." And of course, that gave me an opportunity to explain to him that if we subscribe to that, then who's the one that does that interpreting? How do we know from one day to the next? If we don't know from one day to the next what the law is, then that's what is the root of tyranny, that the government is unrestrained and can do anything it wants. And that came as just an eye-widening, amazing proposition, and he wasn't even prepared to argue against it, really, because he'd never heard anything else.
I love what they don't call it programming for nothing on television. They don't call television that's a one-eyed monster in our living room, and they have really heightened the art. I call it the art of slavery, to the point that the slave don't know they're slave. I'm not a slave, man. I can go get my pickup and go get a beer.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That I remember reading in the great British writer, and he wrote about the conversation that these devils were having with each other. Hopefully I'll remember the name of the book and the author. But this great, it was a young devil being discipled by an old devil, and the old devil said, "Well, the moment of our greatest success is when we keep them from believing in God, and yet they do fear us."
Well, that's your whole thing: divide and conquer, and fear. They use fear as a weapon. I don't want anybody to be afraid. I'm not here to scare anybody. I'm here to give you hope, because there are men out there like Larry Pratt, like myself, that will stand up to this, like Sheriff Richard Mack, like Eustace Mullins. We wrote the books. We gave we put the information out. I've been doing this radio show for almost 20 years. Guess what? I've never been sued for libel or slander. I've been publishing magazines for 30 years. Never been sued for libel and slander, Larry. But I've been slandered a lot.
The truth is a defense, and if somebody realizes that they can't disprove what you're saying, and they could end up spending a lot of money not winning, and perhaps even be subject to a frivolous lawsuit complaint of their own. So yeah, I think that's a very good way to frame the way you and I have been able to operate. Certainly we've never been sued, because the truth is a defense, and we really try to be very careful that when we make a statement, we may use strong language, but we want to make sure that it's true, and that so far has kept Gun Owners of America in good stead for well over 30 years. By the way, I would like to point out to folks, if they're interested in finding out more about Gun Owners of America, the lobby work that we do, they can go to gunowners.org. We even have an alert that they can sign up for. It's a freebie. Just go to gunowners.org, and that way they'll be able to be kept appraised of what's going on Capitol Hill, and most of those alerts that we send out will contain an embedded email that they can send off to the appropriate member of Congress and do a little bit of grassroots lobbying very easily and quickly. So that's been a very helpful thing, and it's been something that the staff tells us that, hey, keep those postcards, because postcards are what we send out to people that get our newsletter and keep those emails coming in. They make a difference.
All right, we've got links to Gun Owners of America right up there, right below your name on every 2 or 3 different places on my website. So we've got links there, and we'll be putting this out. People really need to hear this. You know, folks, we're not the radicals. Larry and I aren't the radicals. We aren't the ones that want to take anything from you or keep you from living the way you're supposed to in a constitutional republic. You know, one of my favorite little things to do, Larry. I love to get a politician talking about our great democracy. Excuse me, sir. What? Could you tell me when that? What Congress revoked our republic? When did we switch over to a democratic system here? And it's kind of interesting. What happens is, if we're in a crowded park, the politician disappears, the cameraman disappear, and you got a bunch of people standing around scratching their head going, what just happened?
Mm-hmm. Well, they'll probably scratch their head for quite a while, won't they?
I am afraid so. You've got your finger on the pulse of everything that's happening. Everything we've talked about today is happening. But somebody told me once, Clay, they don't have the power they want you to think they have. If they did, we'd still be under the Roman Empire or the Syrian Empire.
Sure.
And I think that's accurate. I don't think they have the power that they have. I think they're run scared.
Well, and it's particularly so because they don't control the message the way they used to. You made a good point about the ultimate in being a slave master is when the slaves don't know that they're slaves and actually think they're living in a normal situation. And that is not something that they're able to maintain. We know that it's not normal for the government to usurp authority that it doesn't have and to exercise powers that it's not allowed to exercise. And when there's pushback, and when we have an effective means of doing it, say, through a county sheriff, that just takes all the fun out of being a tyrant. We've got all these peasants running around saying, no, you don't have authority to do that, and if you continue to push, I'll do what the Indiana sheriff did, or farmer did. I'll go get my sheriff, and he'll deal with you, with he and his deputies, and if need be, some militia, and we're going to resist you. You will not be allowed to do that. And
all right, I want to address that, Larry. I want to address that right now because this is what people understand. I'd really recommend that people listen to the show we did yesterday, and you should probably just copy it right off my site, your name and the GOA site, and send it out to anybody on your email list. That certainly would help me out, Larry, and I'd really appreciate it because people need to hear this. There is hope out there. We can do this. We can take it back county by county, city by city, town by town, farm by farm, ranch by ranch. I believe we got the power. I'm not anti-government. I'm the most pro-government guy you've got out there, folks. I want the constitutional republic guaranteed me by that Constitution. And we got power. We've got power. We've got power here, folks. If what the gentleman talked about yesterday is the militia, yeah, he's forming a militia. Yeah, and they're working for the governor just like mine, and they're working for the sheriff with the sheriff to back up the sheriff.
This is exactly the way it's supposed to happen.
Now, what they want to do, Larry, what they're trying to do here is make us into criminals. They're trying to, the militia, that's bad. Don't talk to them, don't talk to them. Don't listen to them, You don't want to hear anything they got to say.
Well, if they want to talk about criminal action, we'll have to consider what they're doing, and if we find that they're doing things they're not allowed to do, that becomes criminal. And they need to think about that, because as the people wake up and become aware of all these abuses that are occurring, that should not be occurring, that are illegal, and that would actually have criminal consequences if the proper actions were taken, then I think that might kind of slow down some of these busybodies who want to have us live under a nanny state. We're telling you right now, nanny, you're fired.
That's right. You know, I've said, Larry, I don't want to give them any credit where credit's not due, but I've said sometimes I think that the whole New World Order, the elitist, they might be right about one thing. People are too damn stupid to govern themselves. Because if the people are letting them get away with robbing your freedoms, leaving your children homeless in the land that our forefathers established, then you're the criminal. You need to be you need to be arrested. And I think that's what they're afraid of it. They're afraid of actually going to court for ripping off the homes and the mortgages and the property of the American people.
You know, that's a good point. Dr. Seidel has talked about his desire to actually get the IRS into court. He said, I want them to take me to court. What the IRS has done and what all these other alphabet soup agencies do is rule by edict from an administrative tribunal within their own agency. It's a judicial, executive, legislative combo that's totally unconstitutional. And so he'll disobey one of those orders, but he keeps telling them, you go get a warrant from a Title III constitutional court, and then we'll talk. You know, then you got. But of course, he also knows that typically they can't get a warrant. They're afraid of what might happen if they do get into court. There might be a bad precedent that could occur, and so they don't do it. For 6 years, he's been telling them, I'll talk to you. It's not that I'm just completely unwilling to have anything to do with you, but I want to do this in a constitutional fashion. And it's the same thing, you know, can the FDA get a warrant to tell that farmer about his milk? They got a subpoena out of a federal court on some trumped-up charges, and the sheriff wasn't buying it, and that's what stopped it there. So even if they have a warrant, it might be a warrant based on some untruthful material, and the federal courts very likely to stick up for a federal agency anyway. The deal is they really don't have authority. There's nothing in Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution, federal Constitution, that gives any authority to set up a Food and Drug Administration. There's no authority for an Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau. There's no authority for a Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Maybe you could tell me real quickly here, Larry. What is the constitutional authorization for making our number one cash crop into a illegal substance?
They don't have authority to regulate booze or marijuana or things like that. States may. It may be something in a state constitution that there could be authority, but certainly not at the federal level. And we know that some states have actually said, you know what, we're going to nullify what you've done at the federal level. And so you might say they've been blowing smoke at the feds, and the feds don't like that, but so far, I think even in California, where they're kind of wussy, some of the marijuana shops have continued in operation. Correct me if I'm wrong. And some other states have also legalized, and the feds have known better than to try to go into some of those states and try anything. So we're seeing a pushback, and you know, I'm to the point where I don't really much mind what the reason for the pushback is. I certainly would never choose to use marijuana, but if that's going to help us push back Leviathan, then let's go push. I would be in favor of enacting the law even if I didn't think anybody was going to buy any. It's just to tell the feds, out of here. You don't have the authority.
That's right.
Alone.
That's right. And now, Larry, I wrote. You know, you just mentioned You can smoke medical marijuana, like here in Arizona. You can smoke medical marijuana in 10 states. When I was over 40 years ago, I had a little bit of marijuana in Texas, and it was a life sentence, potentially, for having a joint in Texas at the time. Things have changed. While I was in prison doing time for smoking marijuana, I wrote a book about the United States in the future when laws against victimless crimes were abolished, when farms and ranches operated, when we had restored $1 billion crop. That was what marijuana, hemp, did for us. We conquered the whole world with hemp, didn't we, Larry? We used it to make our sails. We used it to make the jeans that we wore. We were used to make the clothes we wore. And, by the way, we also printed the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence out of it, and made our flag out of it. Pretty incredible.
Interesting. It has so many different uses.
That's right. Popular mechanics referred to it in the 30s as our $1 billion crop. And you can grow it in Red China, or Russia, or Mexico, or Canada, but you can't grow it here. To me, that's a police state.
There's an industry of enforcement of the prohibition industry, and they have a vested interest, of course, in continuing the war on drugs. And the pity is that this generation doesn't seem to be capable of learning from experience the way my parents' and grandparents' generation was when they enacted prohibition. I think it might have been perhaps a popular measure that maybe most of the people in the country, the majority, supported. They did get a constitutional ratification with the number of states, so that tells me that there was some kind of support. But when they realized that this was counterproductive and was actually the gasoline, as it were, that was running the criminal machine, they said, well, this is stupid. All we're doing is getting more crime and more violence, and let's undo it. So they got rid of the Volstead Act, and they got rid of the 16th Amendment, and said, okay, our bad, let's not do that again. But here we are doing the same kind of thing, and we haven't learned the way our fathers did.
Hopefully they'll learn. Larry Pratt, it's always a pleasure to have you on. It's reassuring to me to know that there's people out there that's working in Washington that are still sane. I really appreciate you.
Well, appreciate knowing that there are folks in the country that are looking for that. Thank you, and thanks for what you're doing.
All right, sir. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate it.
You bet.
All right. And folks, I've got all these people. I got these people coming on the chat room. Don't donate to this guy. Don't donate to this guy. Why? Why do they do that? What are they doing? What are these trolls doing? Are they just taking a little page out of the ADL's playbook to demonize the militia, to demonize patriots, to demonize anybody? I've been doing this show for 20 years. I ain't rich. Maybe I'm not as successful as Alex Jones, because I do talk about the Jews, I do talk about the guns, and I do tell you the truth. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-tyranny. And oh, Puma, I bet your beer bill is more than my pot bill ever will be.
Discover what's really good.